Well, sadly, if history is any precedent, it would suggest that crisis and conflict of some sort is going to continue in Syria for a long time. The fundamentals that cause this conflict, both the domestic components and the international components, don't seem to be settled and don't seem likely to be settled anytime soon. So we can only go on similar conflicts elsewhere as our guide. You might look at somewhere like Lebanon that had a 15-year civil war of a similar nature, or Iraq, where actually even though some degree of political settlement was made in the late 2000s, conflict re-erupted in 2014 and remains underway today. So whilst I don't think it's for certain that the Syrian civil war will continue as it has done, with the same actors, with the same players involved for the next 5 years or 10 years or so, I think the possibility that peace is going to suddenly break out and we'll see stability in Syria seems highly unlikely. Different types of violence, whether it's localized or directed by the state, by the Assad regime or its successor, seem likely to continue in some capacity for some time still, until those core fundamental causes of the war, the domestic and the international, are at least some way towards being settled.